podcast.
Welcome to Our Weird World. I'm your host, John Henson. And listen, all right, here's the thing. I probably should have addressed this a while back. But I know the audio has not been great lately. Been a lot of hard P's. I'm sure that destroyed some speakers right there. But yeah, I know the P's have been a little hard because I lost. Who knew that having a boom mic and a double windscreen would have taken some of those P's out? I've also just got to figure out how to hold the microphone closer to my mouth, but not directly in the way of my P's and stuff. That's actually pretty good. I think maybe if I just do it to the side a little bit, we might be okay. Anyway, I've been aware of it. I don't know if maybe anyone else noticed it and has just been dealing with it, or maybe they stopped listening because it got so bad. But I'm better now. No, I'm not. I'm looking at the waves in real time, and it's not getting better, I don't think. Anyway, today it's a new month. It's been a month for a week, but it's the 17th edition of the Weird Fun Bag. 3 stories as usual. Troy, Leon Gregg, Khaled Mashal, and our first story of Poon Lim.
Story time. Story time. Story time? Story time.
Poon Lim was a Chinese steward working for the British on the SS Ben Lomond. SS Ben Lomond. Anyway, as it sailed from Cape Town, South Africa to New York during World War II. On November 23rd, 1942, a German U-boat intercepted the Ben Lomond off the coast of Brazil and blew it up with a couple of torpedoes. Because that's just what the Germans did. Like, the Germans were just up to so many different things that, like, their U-boat campaign just gets forgotten. They had so many submarines just trolling all the waters, mostly the Atlantic, and they torpedoing ships left and right. And so many, I mean, like, and they even were like really close off the coast of the United States. Like, I think we covered this story where, like, they even had soldiers, technically invade the United States. It was only like a couple of guys, and like all but one of them ended up deserting. So like it worked out. But like, I mean, and like U-boats were like really like regularly seen. I know off the coast of North Carolina quite a bit. It was just like, it's crazy. Like you don't think about how close Germany may have actually been to invading the United States, which would not have worked for them at all, right? Because, like, that's the great thing about America, it's, of the few things right now, where it's like, we got that ocean protection. You know, we can see invaders coming from miles away, unless it's coming from Mexico, and then you never see them, apparently. I don't know. Not to get political or anything. Anyway, so, Poon Lim. I love that his name was Poon, by the way. It's just great. He's on this British passenger ship, I guess is what it was. Or he's a steward. So yeah, it was kind of a passenger ship. Going from Cape Town, South Africa to New York. German U-boat torpedoes it, blows it up. And realizing that he was about to die, Poon grabbed a life jacket and jumped overboard just before the boilers on the ship exploded, killing a lot of people. Although he survived the shipwreck, he was now just kind of floating in the ocean 250 miles away from land. And here's the thing. He was, by all accounts, the only survivor of this shipwreck. He quickly found a small wooden raft that was miraculously stocked with biscuits, water, chocolate, sugar, flares, pots, and a flashlight, which is insane. The crazy amount of, because this ship exploded, but then they just conveniently had a life raft that had all of this stuff stocked on it. Like, they knew it was going to happen, right? Like, And maybe that's what they had to do. They just had their lifeboats fully stocked, knowing full well that there was a good chance that their ship was going to get sunk, which is crazy. Despite having just witnessed the death of everyone around him, things actually seemed to go great for the first few days while he's just kind of stranded out in the middle of the ocean. But then he ran out of food and water, and so he quickly resorted to catching fish and collecting rainwater in a canvas. Because he was a terrible swimmer, which made his choice to work on a ship very strange. Poon tied a rope around his waist and attached it to the raft in case he ever fell overboard. He fashioned knives out of the used biscuit tins that he used to cut open the fish that he caught. At one point, though, he got caught up in a large storm, which sent huge waves crashing into his raft, contaminating all of his clean water and spoiling what little food he had saved. He ultimately resorted to catching a bird and drinking its blood to survive, which is wild. When sharks began circling the raft, probably because he's just got all this loose bird blood floating around, Poon decided it would be a great idea to catch one just to basically establish dominance over the shark world. That's probably true. Using the leftovers from the bird that he had killed, Poon was able to actually catch a shark, drag it aboard the raft, where, not surprisingly, the shark began trying to attack him. Because that's what sharks do. They're swimming, and if they're not swimming, they're attacking. And that's it. That's all a shark does. But thinking quickly, Poon grabbed a water jug full of seawater and knocked the shark out long enough for him to cut open its liver and drink its blood. This dude is hardcore. I would never. I just kill myself immediately. I got a lot of quit in me. All right. Not gonna lie. If I'm ever stranded out in the ocean, once I run out of food and water, I'm done. I'm killing myself. I'm letting myself starve to death or whatever. 'Cause I'm not drinking bird blood and shark blood to stay alive. That's gross. Anyway, as if things at this point weren't bad enough for Poon, he was passed several times by other ships who definitely saw him floating out there, but did not stop to help. And Poon, being the nice, understanding guy that he was, believed that none of those ships stopped for him out of fear that he was, Japanese. He wasn't. He was Chinese. Or he was a decoy set by the Germans who would then just pop out and torpedo the ships that came to rescue him. One ship, however, did drop a marker buoy nearby, but another storm quickly swept through and he was, the buoy was lost, and so he's just out on his own again. Finally, on April 5th, 1943, after spending 133 days floating in the Atlantic Ocean, Poon finally just kind of floated. The current finally got him close enough to land, where a group of Brazilian fishermen saw him and rescued him and took him to the city of Belém. After spending 4 weeks in a Brazilian hospital, the British consul arranged for his return to England. At that time, he set the record for the longest amount of time stranded at sea, and then he ultimately died in Brooklyn almost 50 years later on January 4th, 1991. So, our next story here is of Troy Leon Gregg, who was born on April 29th, 1948, but his story really begins on November 21st, 1973, when Gregg murdered Fred Simmons and Bob Moore after the two men had offered Gregg and another man, Dennis Weaver, a ride. As bad hitchhiking attempts usually went in the 1970s, Gregg tried to rob Simmons and Moore, but ended up killing them instead. So Gregg was given the death penalty, as he should. But at the time, laws in the state of Georgia where all of this took place required that a separate trial take place following a death penalty conviction to make sure any additional aggravating or mitigating circumstances were presented to confirm the death sentence. And I can appreciate that, right? It makes sure, double checks to make sure that a fully innocent dude is not going to be unnecessarily killed. I'm fine with that, all right? We don't have to abolish the death penalty. We can just have this next trial to just double check. All right. And so, again, and here's the thing, right? Like, sure, maybe we, if there's enough questionable evidence for someone who killed one person, all right, fine, send him to life in prison. But if it's like a dude who killed multiple people and there's like video evidence or very clear forensic evidence that shows that he killed all of these people, then kill him immediately. Like, don't sit him on death row for years. Let's this court finds you guilty, take him out back, pop, pop, done, right? Like, that's how it should be. And it's not. And that makes me sad. Anyway, that's beside the point. So while Gregg awaited his execution, because it was confirmed, his case and a handful of others was sent all the way to the United States Supreme Court, who was then set to decide on whether or not the death penalty was a violation of the Eighth Amendment's cruel and unusual punishment clause. It's not. I don't care what, I forget what the ruling is. We're about to find out. But like, it's not, maybe some forms of execution could be, but like firing squad, no. Lethal injection, if you give it something strong enough, no. Whatever. Gas chamber, maybe. Hanging or guillotine, no. That's not cruel and unusual. That's quick and easy. Anyway, in the end, here we go. I'm going to deliver. Because remember, I forget what all these stories are. I wrote them several years ago. And so we're going to relearn them together. In the end, the Supreme Court ruled that a death sentence must contain the following in order to be upheld and not considered cruel and unusual. The first one was that objective criteria to direct discretion in the sentencing, which must then be ensured by an appellate review. Basically what that means is like there has to be clear, obvious evidence. It's going to automatically be appealed and it has to be upheld in the appeal. The second one, the judge must take into account the accused person's character and criminal record, which seems like a given, right? Like you would think that someone who has a gigantic rap sheet, who then rapes and murders a dozen people, that you take that into consideration. Oh, he already was in prison 3 other times and our state inexplicably released him. Okay, yeah, kill him. Or, this guy he just had a bad day. He's an upstanding citizen. He always volunteered at the soup kitchen. And then he was having a bad day. And a homeless guy flicked hot soup in his face and he just hauled off and murdered him. That's pretty understandable. We all have bad days. I can't let him back out. We can give him probably like 40 years for that. That's probably fine. We don't need to give him the death penalty. So, unfortunately for Gregg, Georgia's pre-existing death penalty process already met those 2 criteria, and so his death sentence was upheld. 2 other cases that went to the Supreme Court, one from Texas, one from Florida, was also upheld, while cases in North Carolina and Louisiana were actually overturned, forcing those states to revise their death penalty process. Gregg, however, he was not about to just wait around on death row for his execution. So on July 28, 1980, Gregg and 3 other convicted murderers escaped from the Georgia State Prison in Reidsville. Without anyone noticing, which is crazy that someone on death row could get away with this, the 4 men altered their prison uniforms to resemble those worn by the correctional officers in the prison. How similar are the inmate uniforms to the prison guard uniforms? I thought that's why they wore like bright orange jumpsuits, and so that like you can't confuse them. Anyway, maybe that happened after this. The men then sawed through the metal bars in their cell and just walked out of the prison walked out of their cells before climbing out of a window and down a fire escape. One of the men's aunts was actually in on this, and she left them a getaway car in the prison visitors lodge, which the men then climbed into and just drove right off the property. A short time later, Gregg actually called the local newspaper in Reidsville to let them know that he and 3 others had escaped and provided their reason for doing so. And here's the thing. When he called the newspaper, this was the first time that anyone had realized that anyone was gone. People back at the prison had not yet realized that 4 prisoners, death row prisoners, had escaped. The group then made their way up to North Carolina, where they stopped to celebrate at a biker bar overlooking the Catawba River. Now, that detail means nothing to most of you. However, Like, as I record this, I still live in Charlotte. The Catawba River flows just to the west of Charlotte. Coming from Georgia, there's a decent chance that this biker bar was kind of in the Charlotte area. It could have also been like, up near Statesville or Hickory or, somewhere up towards the mountains, but I don't know. But I like to think it was near Charlotte. Anyway, reports vary as to what happened next. Some sources say Gregg, who was very drunk at this point, tried to assault a waitress, which is not something you do at a biker bar, or really anywhere for that matter. One of the bikers saw the incident take place and beat Gregg to death before dumping his body in the river. Another source claimed that Gregg got into a fight with one of his fellow escapees, Timothy McCordale, and a member of the Outlaws Motorcycle Club who was at the bar. And then those two teamed up to beat Gregg to death and dump his body in the river. Either way, we know that Gregg's body ended up in the river. No one was ever charged in Gregg's death due to a lack of evidence. The three other men who escaped with Gregg were then captured 3 days later. Our final story here begins on September 25th, 1997, when Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered the Israeli Mossad, like their version of the CIA, to assassinate Khaled Mashal, the leader of Hamas, which is this Islamic fundamentalist terrorism organization that has been fighting in Israel since the late 1980s. They do a lot of stuff with Gaza. Israel doesn't like that. They fire rockets and things happen, and then white people get super opinionated about it, even though they don't understand any of it. It's all been going on for so long. Well, anyway, Benjamin Netanyahu ordered the assassination of the leader of Hamas at that time. So if he did this in response to the Mahan Yehuda market bombings that had taken place earlier in the year that Hamas orchestrated, that killed 16 people and wounded 178 others. Now, Mashal, he knew that the Israelis were coming for him, as he should. Like when you launch a terrorist attack in Israel, you should just know that they're going to come after you and get their revenge in a big way. So he flees to Jordan, and where the two countries were operating under a peace treaty stipulating that neither country do anything to agitate the other. Otherwise, stuff's going to hit the fan. All right. So Mashal, he's playing chess here, right? He knows that he's going to go to Jordan, and he knows that if Israel tries to kill him in Jordan, that's probably going to violate the treaty and then cause a big old skirmish. So Netanyahu, he doesn't care. He's going to do what he did anyway. So they sent their two best Mossad agents, a group known for their expert sniping and tactical combat abilities. So they sent them into Jordan to eliminate Mashal. But rather than relying on their expertise, which is what everyone in the Middle East was expecting them to do, these two Mossad agents did something completely different. They started by entering the country using fake Canadian passports, which, Canada, a predominantly Arabic country, as we all know. They then traveled to the Hamas headquarters in Amman and waited for Mashal to just show up to work. As Mashal walked into his office to file, whatever paperwork terrorists need to file, one Mossad agent dropped a shaken can of soda on the floor to cause a distraction. While everyone is looking at this can of soda, the other Mossad agent walked up behind Mashal and used like this special James Bond device to inject a slow-acting, lethal amount of fentanyl into Mashal's ear. I don't know how you don't realize that just happened. Like, you're looking and then you don't feel like a little prick in your ear as someone walks by. Like, that's what we're doing out here. And this isn't even like, this is the 80s, man. Or no, this is late 90s, but still just some tiny little device that can inject fentanyl like right into your ear. That's crazy. So Mashal, little shot of fentanyl right into his ear. And it worked. Although it somehow worked. But in the process, two of Mashal's bodyguards saw the little prick, right, and chased down both Mossad agents. Now, what they should have done, since they had their fake Canadian passports, they could have just run over to the Canadian embassy, where they would have been like, oh yeah, there's our citizens there. Yep, they got their Canadian passports there, and we're gonna just protect them. Let's let some due process, whatever. But no, they didn't do that. Instead, they ran to the Israeli embassy, where they were promptly arrested. King Hussein of Jordan immediately demanded that Netanyahu send the antidote for the fentanyl overdose that was actively happening, but Netanyahu refused. So when King Hussein threatened to void the treaty, they had to call up old Slick Willie, old President Bill Clinton, to come in and intervene, where he then convinced Netanyahu to hand over the antidote. By the time that the antidote arrived, Mashal was in a coma, but the antidote worked, and Mashal made a full recovery, which is crazy. To make up for the incident, the Israelis then released Ahmed Yassin, the spiritual leader of Hamas, despite having given him a life sentence. But, again, it all worked out. All right, there we go. The weird fun bag number 17 in the books. Let us recap and see what we learned today.
What did we learn?
Number 1, if you ever find yourself stranded at sea, just kill a bird and drink its blood like you're some weird kind of survivalist vampire. It works. And then eventually, maybe, if you survive long enough, the ocean will push you back close enough to land where people will see you. Number 2, listen, if you escape from prison, I don't know why I said it like I'm Jeff Foxworthy. If you escape from prison, you might be a convicted killer. Anyway, if you escape from prison, don't just go to a biker bar and start being a dick. All right. Bikers don't play like that. All right. Bikers, maybe they house convicted felons, but it kind of depends on what you did. And if you're getting handsy with a waitress who's not all about that, they're gonna not take too kindly to that. So, Leon Gregg, convicted on death row, escaped prison, and then got a little too cocky at a biker bar, and he ended up in the river. And then number 3, Khaled Mashal, the leader of Hamas, was the target of a crazy, James Bond, assassination attempt, and it worked, but then they got him the antidote, and it was all just a big mess in this never-ending saga of Israel and all the other stuff that they're doing over there.
What did we learn?
Next week on Our Weird World, I'm excited for this episode. I haven't been this excited for an episode in a long time. Next week, it is the week leading up to Easter. And, oh boy, next week, it is all about Jesus Christ. Now listen, I'm not you've heard the story of Jesus. You hear it every year at Christmas, all that kind of stuff. All right, we're not getting into that. All right. But we are getting into some stories of kid Jesus. All right. These are stories from basically what are considered apocryphal books of the Bible. There are denominations of Christianity, typically in Africa, maybe even somewhat of Europe, maybe even Russia, perhaps, that have these books in their version of the Bible. They're not in the American Bible, not in the King James Bible, because they don't make Jesus look great. All right, very contradictory image of Jesus as a kid. Because spoiler alert, Jesus was kind of a dick as a kid, and so, but these are stories that people believe are true. They are in versions of the Bible, and I'm going to share them with you. It is all about Jesus Christ next week on the show. So thank you so much for continuing to listen. Keep telling all your friends. and keep it weird.
This is a podcast.